when legendary mountaineer Jack Winters applied to join the elite climbing expedition to K2's treacherous West Ridge, the team's millionaire sponsor dismissed him immediately. "We need cutting-edge climbers, not museum pieces," tech billionaire Richard Chen told the 62-year-old former Special Forces mountaineer, who had summited 7 of the world's 14 8,000-meter peaks, reluctantly hired as a base camp logistics coordinator. After their primary guide suffered a last-minute injury, Winters was ordered to stay at base camp and manage the radio. The wealthy climbers openly mocked his outdated techniques and obsolete equipment as they departed for the summit attempt with their inexperienced but Instagram-famous lead guide. 4 days later, when the worst blizzard in decades trapped the entire team in the notorious death zone above 23,000 feet, with depleted oxygen and no viable descent route, base camp received a desperate radio call: conditions unsurvivable, no visibility, severe frostbite spreading. What followed was described by the mountaineering community as the most extraordinary solo rescue in Himalayan history, as the man they deemed too old navigated the unnavigable to reach 14 climbers given up for dead. K2 Base Camp, Karakoram Range, Pakistan, present day. Winters: "We need those weather reports transmitted to the advance team every 2 hours, not every 4. Richard Chen instructed, without looking up from his satellite phone, and check the oxygen inventory again. "Jenkins thinks we're short 3 canisters. "Already done, sir," Jack Winters replied evenly, his weathered hands continuing to adjust the radio equipment with practiced precision. "Weather reports are now on 2-hour intervals, and we have full oxygen inventory. No shortages." Jenkins was counting incorrectly. Chen finally glanced up, irritation flashing across his features. "Just handle the base camp logistics, as assigned. The summit team needs everything perfect." At 62, Jack Winters had long ago learned to let ego-driven slights roll off him like mountain mist. 3 decades in Special Forces mountain operations, followed by 15 years as a professional high-altitude guide, had taught him that mountains ultimately cared nothing for human arrogance. K2, the savage pyramid of rock and ice looming above their base camp, had claimed 1 life for every 4 successful summiteers throughout its climbing history. As Chen strode away to join the rest of the summit team for their final briefing, Winters continued methodically checking the communications equipment. The expedition had spared no expense in technology: satellite phones, GPS trackers, drone reconnaissance of the route, and custom-designed equipment from the most expensive brands. What they lacked, in Winters' carefully unvoiced opinion, was sufficient respect for the mountain they intended to climb. The Apex Technology K2 expedition, fully funded by Chen's tech fortune and extensively documented for a streaming documentary, had assembled a team of climbers whose social media following outweighed their high-altitude experience. Their original lead guide, the only member besides Winters with previous 8,000-meter summit experience, had broken his ankle 2 weeks before departure. Winters had been hired as a last-minute replacement, then immediately sidelined to base camp duty upon arrival. The old man, still sulking about being left behind, called Jason Rivera, the expedition's 28-year-old climbing influencer, whose YouTube channel boasted 2 million subscribers. His audience eagerly followed his extreme adventure challenges, though none had included the sustained brutality of K2's upper reaches. "Just checking communications," Winters replied calmly. "West Ridge route loses signal in several sections. You'll want to confirm radio protocols before ascending." Rivera laughed, adjusting his designer sunglasses. "We've got satellite tracking and emergency beacons. Nobody relies on radios anymore, Graham." Winters nodded without argument, though he noted that Rivera's emergency beacon was incorrectly attached to his harness, a detail he'd attempted to point out earlier, only to be dismissed. Across the camp, the expedition's new lead guide, Mackenzie Walsh, was reviewing the summit route on a tablet displaying a 3D model of the mountain. At 34, Walsh had built an impressive resume of technically challenging climbs, though her experience above 7,000 meters was limited to a single guided ascent of Everest via the standard route. Winters had approached her the previous evening, offering insights on the West Ridge's notorious weather patterns and technical challenges. Her response had been polite, but dismissive. "Thanks, but we've got current satellite imagery and weather model. The old route descriptions don't really apply with today's technology." Now, as the summit team prepared for departure the following morning, Winters continued his assigned duties, while quietly maintaining his own weather observations and route assessment. 30 years of mountain operations had ingrained habits that no amount of dismissal could erase. Later that evening, as the team enjoyed their final base camp dinner before beginning their summit push, Chen raised a toast with expensive champagne transported to base camp, at considerable expense. To making history on K2's West Ridge, he proclaimed, the first team to live-stream a summit from the world's most dangerous mountain. Cheers erupted around the table, though Winters noted the nervous glances exchanged by some of the Sherpa team, local climbers whose extensive experience on 8,000-meter peaks was being similarly overlooked in favor of technological solutions. As the celebration continued, Sarah Patterson, the expedition doctor, joined Winters at his isolated table. "They don't make it easy to help them, do they?" she observed quietly. Winters smiled slightly. "Mountains have a way of adjusting attitude." Chen's determined to summit, no matter what, Patterson continued, concern evident in her voice. "The weather window looks shorter than they're admitting." "I noticed," Winters confirmed. He hesitated, then added, "I've left detailed route notes and contingency plans in the communications tent, including emergency descent options for the West Ridge, if conditions deteriorate." Patterson studied him thoughtfully. "They don't realize what they've sidelined, do they? I looked you up. You know, 3 winter rescues on Denali, first American solo summit of Nanga Parbat, plus your Special Forces career." Winters shrugged. "Different era. Today's climbing is all about the fastest time, the newest route, the most followed. Until something goes wrong," Patterson noted grimly. "Let's hope it doesn't," Winters replied, though years of experience had taught him that on K2, disaster wasn't a possibility, it was a probability for the unprepared. The following morning dawned clear and cold as the summit team departed base camp. Amid fanfare and drone footage, Winters watched them ascend toward Camp 1, noting with professional concern their inconsistent pace and haphazard formation. The Sherpa team, laden with equipment and supplies, maintained a more disciplined rhythm ahead of them. "Good luck," he murmured, as they disappeared around the mountain's shoulder. In the decades he'd spent on the world's highest peaks, Jack Winters had learned that luck was a poor substitute for preparation, a lesson the Apex Technology K2 expedition might soon learn for themselves. Day 4 of the expedition had proceeded according to schedule, with the team establishing Camp 3 at 21,500 feet on K2's challenging West Ridge. Their social media updates showed exhausted but triumphant climbers, with spectacular drone footage of their precarious position on one of mountaineering's most notorious routes. At base camp, Jack Winters monitored their progress with professional detachment, maintaining the weather observation logs and communication schedules that had been his assigned responsibility. But something in the barometric readings troubled him, a pattern he'd seen only twice before in his decades of high-altitude climbing. "Sarah, take a look at this," he called to Dr. Patterson, who was organizing the medical tent. She joined him at the weather station, studying the rapidly dropping pressure readings. "That can't be right." The forecast showed clear weather for the next 3 days. "Forecasts are models, not guarantees," Winters replied, already pulling up satellite imagery, especially on K2. The images confirmed his suspicion. A massive storm system had changed direction unexpectedly, and was now moving directly toward the mountain at alarming speed. Worse, its intensity had increased dramatically in the past 6 hours. "We need to warn them immediately," Patterson said, reaching for the radio. Winters was already transmitting. "Summit team, base camp, priority weather alert. Severe storm approaching from southwest. Estimated arrival at your position in less than 12 hours. Recommend immediate descent to Camp 2. Acknowledge." After several tense moments, Walsh's voice crackled through the speaker. "Base camp, we're receiving. Current position, Camp 3. All members present. Weather clear. At our location, Are you certain about this forecast? Absolutely certain, Winters confirmed, his tone leaving no room for debate. This system developed suddenly. It's moving fast and intensifying. You need to descend now while visibility holds. There was a pause before Chen's voice replaced Walsh's. Winters, we've invested too much to retreat, based on base camp readings. Our satellite forecast shows potential for increased winds, but nothing requiring evacuation. We're continuing to Camp 4 tomorrow as planned. Winters closed his eyes briefly, controlling his frustration. Mr. Chen, with respect, I've seen this weather pattern before on 8,000-meter peaks. It indicates a potentially catastrophic storm. Your team is currently above 21,000 feet. If you're caught in this system at Camp 4, evacuation may become impossible. We have emergency equipment and supplies, Chen responded dismissively. And state-of-the-art satellite communication. Stop overreacting. Based on outdated methods, focus on your assigned duty. As the radio fell silent, Patterson stared at Winters in disbelief. They're not coming down? Apparently not, Winters replied grimly, already moving to the equipment tent. Which means we need to prepare for worst-case scenario. Over the next 6 hours, Winters methodically inventoried all available rescue equipment, while continuing to monitor the approaching storm. The satellite images now showed a system of unprecedented intensity, what meteorologists would classify as a perfect storm of colliding pressure systems directly over K2's position. By nightfall, the first effects were visible at base camp, with winds increasing dramatically and temperature dropping. Radio contact with Camp 3 became increasingly erratic, as the storm began to affect transmission quality. Base camp. Summit team, Walsh's voice came through, now tinged with evident concern. Weather deteriorating rapidly at our position, visibility dropping, wind estimated at 50 knots, and increasing, temperature approximately -40 Celsius. Summit team, what is your status? Winters responded immediately. Are all members accounted for? Affirmative. All intents at Camp 3, conditions preventing any movement. Walsh's transmission was repeatedly broken by static. Mr. Chen acknowledges, your weather assessment was correct, requesting option. Winters exchanged glances with Patterson. The situation was deteriorating faster than even he had anticipated. Summit team, secure all equipment immediately. Double anchor all tents, consolidate oxygen supplies, conserve batteries by maintaining single communication device active. Report status every 2 hours. Understood, Walsh responded, her voice nearly lost in the increasing static. Next communication 2 hours. But 2 hours later, their scheduled transmission never came. Repeated calls from base camp went unanswered. By midnight, the storm had reached base camp with full fury, with hurricane-force winds making it impossible to leave the reinforced communications tent. Could their radio equipment have failed? Patterson asked, voicing the most optimistic possibility. Possible, Winters acknowledged, but they have satellite phones and emergency beacons as backup. The base camp manager, Mohammed Khalid, pointed to his screens. GPS trackers still showing position at Camp 3. No movement, but signal strength weakening. Dawn brought no improvement. The storm had intensified beyond all predictions, with visibility at base camp reduced to less than 10 meters in blowing snow and winds exceeding 80 knots. Repeated communication attempts yielded nothing but stat. Then shortly before noon, a broken transmission finally came through, not via radio, but through a fragmented satellite phone connection. Base, emergency. The voice was barely recognizable as Walsh's. Tents, destroyed. Team, sheltering in snow cave. 2 members, severe frostbite. Oxygen, running low. No visibility for descent. Conditions, unsurvivable. Winters leaned toward the microphone. Walsh, confirm your exact position. Camp 3, partially blown away. Temperature, -4. Wind, cannot stand. Rivera, hypothermic. Chen, frostbitten hand. Understood. Maintain shelter. Conserve oxygen. We're developing rescue options, Winters responded,
his mind already calculating possibilities and probabilities. As the transmission ended, the base camp team looked to Winters expectantly. The situation was beyond dire. 14 climbers trapped above 21,000 feet in conditions that had already destroyed their shelter, with limited oxygen and deteriorating physical conditions. Standard rescue protocols called for helicopter evacuation, but no aircraft could fly in the current conditions, which were forecast to continue for at least 3 more days. "We need to contact Pakistani military rescue," Khalid suggested. "Perhaps when storm clears, they'll be dead by then," Winters interrupted quietly. Exposure at that altitude, in these conditions, without adequate shelter or oxygen, maximum survival time is approximately 36 hours, less for those already compromised, so they're beyond rescue. Patterson asked, the doctor in her already calculating the grim mathematics of high-altitude mortality. Winters was silent for a long moment, studying the topographic maps and weather data with intense concentration. Then he straightened. "Decision made. Not beyond rescue," he said finally. "Just beyond conventional rescue." Patterson stared at him. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm going up," Winters stated simply. The declaration was met with stunned silence, then immediate objections. "Impossible," Khalid insisted. "No single climber could reach Camp 3 in these conditions. Even expert rescue teams wouldn't attempt it." "The normal routes?" "No," Winters agreed. "But there's an alternative approach through the northwest couloir. It's more sheltered from the prevailing winds, technically more difficult, but potentially navigable even in these conditions." "You'd never make it," Patterson argued, "and even if you did, how would you bring 14 incapacitated climbers down?" Winters moved to his personal equipment, which had remained meticulously packed and ready despite his base camp assignment. "Not planning to bring them down immediately. First priority is reaching them with supplemental oxygen and medical supplies, stabilize their condition, establish temporary survival shelter, then assist descent when weather window allows." As he spoke, he was already methodically checking his climbing gear, equipment that appeared deceptively basic compared to the team's high-tech gear, but which represented decades of refinement for extreme conditions. "This is suicide," Khalid stated flatly. "You're asking to die alongside them." Winters looked up, his weathered face set with the quiet determination that had characterized his entire career in impossible environments. "I've navigated worse conditions in the Hindu Kush with special forces. The difference between possible and impossible is often just a matter of experience." Patterson studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "What do you need from us?"
The storm had transformed Kaitu into a realm of mythological fury, a domain of ice, wind, and lethal cold that defied human intrusion. As Jack Winters stepped beyond the relative protection of base camp, the full force of nature's violence assaulted him with an intensity that would have deterred any rational assessment of survival. But Winters had long ago learned that conventional calculations of possibility had to be abandoned in extreme environments. His training with Special Forces mountain divisions had embedded a different equation into his approach. When lives depended on action, the only calculation that mattered was whether death was certain without intervention. For the 14 climbers trapped at Camp 3, death was indeed certain without intervention. That knowledge drove Winters forward into conditions that no reasonable rescue protocol would contemplate. His approach was unconventional from the outset. Rather than attempting the standard route, Winters navigated toward the northwest couloir, a technical ice chute rarely attempted due to its difficulty, but which offered critical protection from the worst of the storm's lateral winds. The specialized gear he carried represented a hybrid philosophy developed over decades. While the summit team had relied almost exclusively on cutting-edge technology, Winters had selected equipment based on redundancy and functionality in worst-case conditions. His oxygen system was an ultralight military design with lower flow rate, but triple the duration of standard mountaineering systems. His communications equipment included both high-tech satellite devices and mechanical backup systems that required no battery. Most critically, his approach to navigation relied on physical waypoints and proven mountaineering techniques, rather than GPS technology vulnerable to the storm's electromagnetic interference. Every 100 vertical meters, Winters placed bright marker flags secured with specialized anchors, creating a physical return path
that would remain viable when all electronic systems failed. 6 hours into his solo ascent, Winters had reached approximately 18,000 feet, moving at a pace that would have been impressive for a climber half his age in good conditions, and was nearly miraculous in the current maelstrom. The northwest couloir had indeed provided some shelter from the direct force of the storm, though shelter was a relative term in an environment where wind speeds still exceeded 60 knots, and temperatures approached -55 Celsius. At base camp, Doc Patterson and Khalid maintained constant vigil, though communications with Winters were limited to brief transmissions at predetermined intervals. Position 18,400 feet, came Winters' terse update. Conditions extreme but manageable. Continuing a set estimated arrival Camp 3 vicinity within 5 hours if pace maintained. Understood, Patterson replied. Any contact from summit team? Negative. Will attempt direct communication when closer to their position, conserving battery power now. As darkness fell, though distinction between day and night was nearly meaningless in the storm's perpetual twilight, Winters faced the most technically challenging section of his route. The upper portion of the northwest couloir featured a series of near-vertical ice pitches that required precise technical climbing. Under normal conditions, such terrain would be climbed with a partner providing belay safety. Alone in hurricane-force winds and temperatures that instantly froze exposed skin, the challenge approached the impossible. Winters methodically secured redundant anchor systems, then executed the climbs with the precision born from thousands of similar ascents. Each movement was economical, each placement of ice tools deliberate and tested. Where younger climbers might have relied on strength and speed, Winters employed technique and experience, virtues that proved far more valuable as conditions deteriorated. At 21,000 feet, the couloir intersected with the standard route approximately 500 horizontal meters from Camp 3's last known position. Here Winters encountered the first physical evidence of the summit team's desperate situation. Fragments of tent fabric and equipment blown from their camp by the ferocious winds. The final approach to Camp 3 presented the most daunting challenge yet. With the limited protection of the couloir behind him, Winters now faced the full brutality of the storm across an exposed ridge. Visibility had dropped to less than 3 meters, with wind speeds approaching 90 knots, force sufficient to lift a person off their feet. Using specialized snow anchors developed during his Special Forces career, Winters created a progressive safety system, securing each section before advancing to the next, methodically traversing terrain that would have been challenging in perfect conditions and appeared suicidal in the current maelstrom. At base camp, the satellite phone crackled to life with an unexpected transmission from the summit team, their first communication in nearly 15 hours. Base, emergency critical. Walsh's voice was barely audible through the static. Oxygen, depleted. Rivera, unconscious. Chen, severe altitude sickness. Cannot maintain temperature. Patterson leaned toward the microphone. Summit team, we have rescue en route to your position. Winters is approaching Camp 3 location now. Estimated arrival within 1 hour. Can you create any signal visible within short range? The response was fragmented but clear enough. No, equipment, functioning. Everything, dead or frozen. We are dying. Hold position. Rescue approaching, Patterson responded, though the transmission had already degraded into static. On the mountain, Winters had reached what his calculations indicated should be the vicinity of Camp 3, though no visual confirmation was possible in the whiteout condition. Using a specialized avalanche beacon modified for extreme conditions, he methodically swept the area, searching for any signal from the team's emergency equipment. After 30 minutes of increasingly desperate searching, a faint electronic response registered on his receiver. Adjusting his direction based on the signal strength, Winters advanced through the blinding snow until a dark shape emerged from the whiteness, not the expected tents, but the entrance to a hastily constructed snow cave. "Hello, the cave," he shouted against the howling wind. Winters from base camp. The response was delayed but unmistakable, a weak light flashing from within the shelter. As Winters carefully approached and cleared the partially blocked entrance, he discovered a scene of profound desperation. The 14 team members were huddled together in the cramped space, many showing clear signs of frostbite and hypoxia. 2 appeared unconscious, including Rivera. Chen was conscious, but clearly suffering from cerebral edema, a potentially fatal swelling of the brain common at extreme altitudes. "How did you?" Walsh began, her cracked lips and frost-covered face transforming her appearance into something barely recognizable. "Northwest Couloir," Winters replied simply, already unpacking emergency oxygen and medical supplies. "Status report. Who's most critical?" Despite her own deteriorating condition, Walsh provided a concise assessment of each team member. Working methodically, Winters administered emergency oxygen to the most compromised climbers while simultaneously preparing dexamethasone injections for those showing signs of cerebral edema. "We tried to descend," Walsh explained weakly as Winters treated Chen's severe frostbite. "Impossible. No visibility. 2 members fell caught by rope." Winters nodded, continuing his rapid triage. "Current shelter insufficient. Need to construct proper snow structure," before continuing treatment. Over the next 3 hours, despite having already completed a nearly impossible solo ascent, Winters directed the construction of a reinforced snow shelter, a sophisticated structure incorporating techniques developed for Arctic warfare survival. Those team members still capable of movement assisted under his precise instruction, creating a shelter designed to withstand the continuing storm, while providing critical protection from the killing cold. Once the improved shelter was complete, Winters established a sustainable oxygen conservation protocol, administered critical medications from his rescue pack, and began treating the most severe frostbite cases, using specialized techniques rarely employed outside military extreme environment operations. "How did you find?" Chen asked weakly, the tech billionaire's arrogance replaced by genuine astonishment. "No GPS working, no visibility. Old-school navigation," Winters replied without elaboration, continuing to check the injured climber's vital signs, physical waypoints and terrain recognition. As the team slowly stabilized under his care, Winters established communication with base camp using his specialized equipment, the only functioning communication system on the mountain. "Patterson," Winters reporting, located all 14 members. "Multiple injuries, including severe frostbite, hypothermia, and altitude sickness. 2 critical but currently stable. Established survival shelter with approximately 36-hour sustainability." "Understood," Patterson's relieved voice responded. "Weather forecast showing potential improvement in 48 hours. Pakistani military mobilizing rescue operation when conditions permit." Winters processed this information with the rapid calculation that had characterized his entire career. "Need extraction before that wind. Will attempt phased descent with most capable team members when storm center passes in approximately 18 hours. Request medical evacuation team meet at Camp 1 position if possible." The strategy was ambitious, but necessary. While the reinforced shelter provided temporary protection, the team's medical conditions would continue deteriorating at this altitude. A full rescue operation might not arrive in time for the most critical case. Through the night, Winters maintained constant vigilance, rotating limited oxygen supplies among team members and treating injuries with the supplies he had carried up the mountain. Despite having been awake for over 36 hours, and having completed a climb that would have exhausted climbers half his age, he showed no signs of fatigue. The discipline forged through decades of operations where rest was a luxury that came only after mission completion. As dawn approached, though only detectable as a slight lightening of the perpetual gray, Winters detected a subtle change in the storm's character. The winds, while still fierce, had shifted direction and marginally decreased in intensity. His experienced senses recognized the pattern. They were in the eye wall of the storm system. A brief period of relative improvement would follow before conditions deteriorated again. "Prepare for movement," he instructed the team. "We have a narrow window to descend to lower altitude."
The narrow weather window Winters had detected represented their only chance for survival, while conditions remained objectively terrible. Winds still exceeding 40 knots, and temperatures hovering around -45°C. The slight improvement from the storm's peak fury might allow controlled descent for the strongest team members. "We move in 3 rope teams," Winters instructed, his voice projecting calm authority despite the dire circumstances. Most experienced climbers in lead positions. I'll take point with the most critical cases. Walsh, despite her own injuries, demonstrated her professional caliber by immediately supporting Winter's plan. Everyone check partner's harness and oxygen. No equipment failures. The evacuation required extraordinary adaptation of standard mountaineering practices. Winters quickly rigged a specialized rescue system using damaged tent poles and climbing equipment to create a modified stretcher for Rivera, who remained unconscious and required constant oxygen. Chen, whose earlier dismissal of Winters had transformed into stunned respect, followed instructions with unquestioning compliance, his frost-bitten hands rendering him largely dependent on assistance. "How are you still functioning?" he asked Winters as the older man secured specialized climbing harnesses for the injured team members. "You climbed up, alone, now leading down, without rest." "Special Forces conditioning," Winters replied simply. "Body adapts to functioning without normal recovery." The descent began in conditions that would have prevented any movement under standard protocols. Visibility remained severely limited, with the added challenge of guiding injured climbers down technical terrain. Winters led the first rope team, personally securing Rivera's improvised stretcher while simultaneously establishing the route and placing protection for the following teams. His technique represented a masterclass in extreme environment rescue, a seamless integration of military precision and mountaineering expertise that few modern climbers had ever witnessed. Each anchor placement was redundant, each route choice calculated to minimize exposure to avalanche risk and wind shear. Where modern climbing often relied on technological assistance, Winters employed a profound understanding of mountain environments that transcended equipment. 6 hours into the descent, they had successfully negotiated the most technical sections and reached approximately 19,000 feet, still dangerously high but increasingly within the realm of survivability. The weather window was closing rapidly, with wind speeds again increasing and visibility deteriorating. "Need to establish intermediate shelter," Winters announced, identifying a relatively protected depression suitable for another snow structure. "Storm center returning. Continue descent impossible for approximately 12." Working with mechanical efficiency despite his evident exhaustion, Winters directed the construction of another specialized snow shelter, larger than the previous one but employing the same military-derived techniques that had kept them alive at camp. As the team settled into the relative protection of the new shelter, Winters established communication with base camp. "Peterson, position approximately 19,000 feet. All members accounted for. 2 critical, 4 serious, remainder stable but compromised. Weather window closing. Holding position until secondary improvement." "Understood," Patterson replied, relief evident in her voice. "Petustani helicopter rescue on standby for first opportunity. Medical team ascending to Camp 1 position. Weather models showing potential clearing intent." Throughout the night, Winters maintained his vigilance, monitoring the injured team members and constantly assessing changing weather conditions. Despite having been in continuous life-or-death activity for over 48 hours, his focus never wavered, a testament to the extraordinary mental discipline that complemented his physical capability. "You're not human," Walsh observed quietly as Winters checked Rivera's condition for the 20th time. "No one should be able to function at this level after what you've done." Winters allowed himself a small smile. "Different training, different standard. Special Forces selection weeds out those who need normal recovery. They said you were too old," she continued. "That your methods were outdated. Age adds tools if you let it," Winters replied. "Experience becomes pattern recognition. You see solutions invisible to others because you've seen similar problems before." By dawn, weather conditions had improved significantly, the massive storm system finally moving beyond K2's position. Winters immediately began preparations for the final descent phase, methodically checking each team member and reorganizing the rope teams based on current conditions. "We have approximately 6 hours of stable weather," he announced. "Objective is Camp 1, where medical support is waiting. Pace will be slow but steady. No unnecessary risks despite improved conditions."
The descent to Camp 1 represented a stark contrast to the previous day's desperate evacuation through near-impossible conditions. With visibility restored and winds diminished, the technical challenge shifted to managing injured climbers on terrain that remained objectively dangerous. Winter's leadership style evolved accordingly, still precise and authoritative, but now incorporating more encouragement and psychological support, as team members confronted the full reality of their injuries and narrow escape from death. When they finally reached Camp 1 at approximately 17,500 feet, they were met by the advanced medical team that had ascended from base camp. Dr. Patterson herself had led the support group, bringing critical medical supplies and additional oxygen. "My God, Jack," she exclaimed as Winters delivered the injured climbers to her care. "You actually did it." Winters nodded tersely, his focus still on the team's safety. "Rivera and Chen need immediate evacuation when helicopters can fly. 5 others with severe frostbite requiring urgent treatment. Remaining members can descend to base camp with support." As the medical team began treating the injured climbers, Khalid approached with the satellite phone. "Pakistani Air Rescue on standby. Conditions now permit helicopter approach to Camp 1. ETA 45 minutes. For the first time since beginning his solo rescue mission, Winters allowed himself to acknowledge the completion of the most critical phase. All 14 climbers had been brought down from the death zone to an altitude where conventional rescue resources could now reach them. As the Pakistani military helicopter approached Camp 1 several hours later, the full extent of Winters' accomplishment began to register with the team. What he had achieved, a solo ascent in storm conditions that would have deterred elite rescue teams, followed by the successful evacuation of 14 injured climbers through technical terrain, represented a feat that mountaineering historians would later describe as beyond the established boundaries of human capability in alpine rescue. Chen, now receiving advanced medical treatment for his severe frostbite and altitude sickness, gestured weakly for Winters to approach his stretcher before being loaded onto the helicopter. "I dismissed you," the tech billionaire said, his voice barely audible above the helicopter's rotor. "Called you obsolete, too old." He paused, struggling with both words and emotion. "I'm alive because I was completely wrong." Winters nodded once in acknowledgement, his response characteristically understated. Mountains have a way of clarifying what matters. As the first evacuation helicopter departed with the most critical patients, Winters finally allowed himself to rest, sitting quietly apart from the group. The physical toll of his extraordinary effort was now evident in his posture, though his alertness never diminished, a lifetime habit of situational awareness that remained active even in exhaustion. Dr. Patterson joined him, providing warm fluids and conducting a quick medical assessment. "You should be evacuated with the second group," she advised, noting signs of frostbite on his exposed skin. "You've been pushing physiological limits for over 60 hours. I'll descend to base camp with the walking wounded," Winters replied. "Save helicopter space for those who need it more." Patterson studied him with professional concern. "What you did, it shouldn't have been possible. Not at your age. Not alone. Not in those conditions." Winters looked toward K2's summit, still wreathed in clouds but now visible against the clearing sky. Possible and impossible are fluid concepts in the mountains. Experience sometimes reveals options invisible to conventional assessment.
Alpine Rescue Congress, Chamonix, France. 3 months later, the Grand Auditorium of the International Mountain Rescue Foundation fell silent as Jack Winters approached the podium. Before him sat the most distinguished gathering of alpine rescue specialists and mountaineers in the world, assembled for the presentation of the Reinhold Messner Medal for Extraordinary Achievement in Mountain Rescue, an honor bestowed only 6 times in the previous 4 decades. The rescue operation, executed by Jack Winters on K2's West Ridge, defies conventional categorization, stated Messner himself, the legendary mountaineer who had presented the award. What official reports describe as a solo rescue mission represents perhaps the most extraordinary feat of high-altitude intervention ever documented. The combination of conditions faced, a storm of historical intensity, 14 incapacitated climbers at extreme altitude, and terrain considered technically challenging, even in ideal conditions, created a scenario that our most advanced rescue protocols would have deemed unsurvivable. Winters, characteristically uncomfortable with formal recognition, addressed the audience with the same quiet authority that had guided the desperate climbers down K2's treacherous face. Rescue fundamentally requires adaptation to circumstances beyond protocol, he began. When standard approaches become impossible, experience often reveals alternatives invisible to conventional assessment. On the large screens behind him, technical analyses displayed the magnitude of what he had accomplished. Satellite imagery showing the unprecedented storm intensity, medical data documenting injuries that should have proven fatal at such altitudes, and route mapping of the path he had navigated alone through conditions that had grounded even military rescue aircraft. In the front row, Richard Chen and several other members of the Apex Technology K2 expedition watched with expressions that mixed profound gratitude with lingering astonishment. Chen's hands remained partially bandaged from frostbite damage, while other team members showed similar evidence of their near-fatal experience, visible reminders of how close they had come to joining K2's long list of casualties. The most valuable lesson from this incident, Winters continued, is not about individual capability, but about the integration of experience-based knowledge with modern techniques. Traditional skills and contemporary technology each have critical roles in extreme environment rescue. This diplomatic framing of what had been, in reality, a stark demonstration of how experience had trumped technology, drew knowing smiles from many of the veteran rescuers in attendance. The mountaineering journals had been less tactful, with headlines like "Old School Mountaineer Saves Social Media Climbers After Technology Fails," and "Too Old, Veteran Rescuer Achieves the Impossible After Being Dismissed for His Age." As Winters concluded his brief acceptance remarks, characteristically focused on technical aspects rather than personal achievement, Chen approached the podium. The tech billionaire, humbled by his experience and still recovering from his injuries, had requested the opportunity to speak. "I owe my life to a man I dismissed as obsolete," Chen stated plainly, his voice carrying clearly through the silent auditorium. "Our expedition embraced every cutting-edge technology and contemporary approach, while sidling Jack Winters, because we perceived his traditional methods as outdated and his age as a limitation." Chen paused, visibly emotional before continuing. "When all our advanced equipment failed, when our modern protocols proved inadequate, Jack's supposedly outdated skills and limited physical capabilities achieved what our experts had deemed impossible. The arrogance of our assumptions nearly cost 14 lives." Following the ceremony, Winters found himself surrounded by mountain rescue specialists from organizations worldwide, all eager to discuss his techniques in professional detail. Among them were representatives from elite military alpine units, who recognized in his methods the specialized approaches developed for operational environments, where failure meant not just personal risk, but mission compromise. "Your snow shelter construction saved those climbers," observed a Norwegian mountain warfare specialist. "That's not standard mountaineering technique. It's military extreme environment survival methodology." Winters nodded. "Special Forces Mountain Division. We developed those techniques for extended operations above 20,000 feet, when extraction was compromised." Mackenzie Walsh, the expedition's lead guide who had developed immense respect for Winters during the ordeal, approached with several young mountaineers in tow. "Jack, these are students from the International Guide Academy. They've been studying your rescue route and techniques as part of their advanced training." The transformation in Walsh was evident, from the confident but inexperienced guide who had dismissed Winters' advice to a professional who now incorporated his methods into her own teaching. Her near-death experience had fundamentally reshaped her approach to mountain risk assessment. "The rope systems you used for the descent are revolutionary for multi-casualty evacuation,"
one of the students commented. No standard protocols address how a single rescuer could secure that many incapacitated climbers on technical terrain. Adaptation of military extraction techniques, Winters explained, developed for scenarios where a single operative might need to evacuate multiple compromised team members under adverse conditions. Later that evening, at a reception hosted by the Alpine Rescue Congress, Winters was approached by the director of the International Mountain Guide Association with an unexpected proposal. We're establishing an advanced rescue methodology program, the director explained, specifically focused on scenarios beyond conventional protocol. We'd like you to develop the curriculum and lead the initial training cycles. Winters considered the offer thoughtfully. My methods are unorthodox by civilian standards. That's precisely the point, the director replied. What you achieved on K2 demonstrated critical gaps in our current approaches. Your integration of military techniques with traditional mountaineering represents a paradigm shift in how we conceptualize extreme rescue scenarios. As the conversation continued, Chen joined them, having overheard the proposal. Whatever compensation they're offering, the Apex Foundation will double it, he stated, and provide full funding for the program's implementation. Winters raised an eyebrow, his expression conveying amused skepticism. Chen smiled slightly, acknowledging the irony. Consider it appropriate reparation for having dismissed the very expertise that saved our lives. The mountaineering community needs your knowledge, particularly as inexperienced climbers with advanced technology continue accessing environments beyond their capability. Over the following year, what became known as the Winters Protocol transformed high-altitude rescue methodology worldwide, combining traditional mountaineering wisdom with specialized military techniques and selective modern technology. The approach filled critical gaps in conventional rescue paradigm. Winters himself divided his time between developing the protocol's curriculum and limited field operations, continuing to climb well into his 60s with the same methodical precision that had characterized his entire career. His age, once viewed as a liability by those who didn't know better, came to be recognized as his greatest asset, representing decades of accumulated knowledge that no technology could replicate. 18 months after the K2 incident, Winters found himself at base camp on Annapurna, where he was consulting with an international rescue team on implementing his protocols in the Himalaya. As evening fell, he was approached by a young climber who had been observing the training sessions with evident fascination. Mr. Winters, the climber began hesitantly, I've studied your K2 rescue extensively. The route you took, the Northwest Kauai, in those conditions, our instructors said it shouldn't have been physically possible, especially, he paused, clearly uncomfortable, especially for someone my age. Winters completed with a slight smile. Yes, sir, the young climber admitted. I mean no disrespect, but the physiological demands at that altitude, in those conditions, conventional wisdom has value, Winters acknowledged, but experience sometimes reveals exceptions to established limitations. Age creates certain constraints, but also provides compensatory advantages if properly leveraged. As they looked toward Annapurna's massive face, illuminated by the setting sun, Winters continued, mountains don't care about our assumptions or limitations. They respond only to actual capability and judgment. Age, technology, reputation. These matter far less than the fundamental question, can you solve the problems the mountain presents with the resources available? That philosophy, distilled from decades of operations in the world's most challenging environments, became the cornerstone of Winters' legacy. What he had demonstrated on K2 wasn't merely an extraordinary rescue, but a profound reassessment of human capability in extreme conditions. The 14 climbers he had saved, once dismissive of his outdated approaches and limiting age, became the most vocal advocates for his methodology. Their near-death experience had provided the most compelling possible evidence that in environments where margins for error approach zero, experience and judgment frequently trump technology. And as Chen later wrote in the foreword to Winters' technical manual, on extreme environment rescue, we mistook age for limitation, tradition for obsolescence, and quiet competence for irrelevance. In doing so, we nearly died on a mountain that demands more than technology and arrogance. Jack Winters didn't just save 14 lives on K2, he redefined our understanding of what's possible when experience meets impossibility. The man they had deemed too old had not only achieved what elite rescue teams considered impossible, but had transformed that achievement into a legacy that would continue saving lives long after the dramatic events on K2's West Ridge had faded from headlines. If this incredible story of an underestimated hero rising to save lives in one of mountaineering's most impossible rescues captured your imagination, hit that subscribe button to join our community. Have you ever known someone whose wisdom and experience were overlooked because of their... Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one and would love to hear your stories. Do you think modern society too often dismisses the value of experience in favor of youth and technology? Let us know. And don't forget to turn on notifications by clicking the bell icon so you never miss our daily uploads of extraordinary true stories that remind us heroes often hide in plain sight.